This is Christian Gomez with the New American Magazine, and today's top headline is entitled Equality Act Seeks Federal Persecution of Christians by Alex Newman. And today we have with us the author of that piece, Alex Newman. Thank you for joining us again today on the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Christian. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So what exactly is this Equality Act that's being pushed in Congress?
It's basically a plan to make people of faith unequal and to persecute them relentlessly and destroy their lives and destroy their ministries and destroy their churches and destroy their businesses if they refuse to genuflect before the LGBT ideology that holds that homosexuality, transgenderism, etc., are protected classes, kind of like race under federal law. So it's basically a way to put a giant bullseye on the back of Christians, Muslims, Jews, etc. Basically, people who believe in objective moral standards when it comes to sexuality. That marriage is between a man and a woman. That sexual relations are reserved for a married couple. All of that is going to be labeled discriminatory under this bill, and practically, essentially outlawed, right? They have coercive measures to force people to comply. And believe it or not, Christian, religious freedom is not a valid defense under this legislation. So.
Wow. So forget about what the Methodist Church, United Methodist Church just voted. Forget about the Southern Baptist Convention or any of the Lutheran synods and other Protestant and even Catholic churches. They would be forced to hire LGBTQ, transgender, homosexual individuals in their institutions, houses of worship, if this is allowed to go through. Then is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. And there's the narrowest of exemptions. I guess like a Catholic priest won't have to perform a homosexual wedding, but that's about the extent of it. So any Christian school will be forced to hire homosexuals to teach the children. Could be forced to hire a transgender, a man who claims he's a woman. They would have to let this man who thinks he's a woman go into the little girl's bathroom, to the changing rooms, to bunk with them on school trips or church trips, and so. There is no way out of this, right, if it passes. And it enshrines basically sexual orientation and gender identity into the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And, at the time, people warned about all the crazy consequences that would stem from that. The idea that you're going to force businesses and private property owners to behave in the way the federal government wants you to behave. And people said, oh, that's ridiculous. Well, now, one of the things that I've been warned about, I reached out to a few prominent people on this legislation, and they told me that there's a very real chance that this could end up protecting pedophiles and pederasts.
Wow.
Because there's this effort to define, they call them minor attracted persons, people who are attracted to children, as a sexual orientation. And if sexual orientation is a protected federal class, how can you not hire a pedophile to run your Sunday school, for example? So the implications of this bill are so monstrous that even homosexual activists are speaking out against it. That ought to tell you something.
Wow. But what about the Christian organizations? Have we heard any sort of opposition coming from any Christian organizations or churches on this legislation, or even any word from the president about whether he would sign this into law or potentially veto it?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a lot of pushback now from the evangelical community. The Catholic bishops, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, just put out a very powerful statement saying that this was going to create havoc. It was going to harm society. There's not enough protections. It's going to be a disaster. It confuses people who have their own dignity and so forth with the actions of those people, whether they're morally problematic or not. So the Catholic Church has been very, very forceful in speaking out about this. A lot of the evangelical and Protestant ministries have been speaking out. Focus on the Family, which is very, very prominent Christian family ministry, has spoken out. They've warned that this is basically going to declare biblical beliefs to be discriminatory under federal law. You have the Liberty Council, the nonprofit Christian legal advocacy group, speaking out very forcefully against this. They said it's the biggest threat to religious freedom and freedom of speech that's ever been introduced in Congress. So you do have a lot of pushback now. I imagine as the Islamic community figures out about this, there's going to be a lot of pushback there as well. We've seen them pushing back in Britain against the LGBT indoctrination in the schools. But virtually the entire Democratic Party, with a few holdouts in Congress, has latched onto this, and unfortunately, 100 of the top mega corporations in the United States, including Google, Facebook, all these tech giants have jumped on the bandwagon as well.
Of course, I'm sure there's very few churches, if any, or other religious organizations of any sort of religious prominence that are backing this measure, correct?
Well, I'm sure we'll have some of the far left pseudo churches where they say they don't believe
Like the
in the
National
Bible,
Council of Churches, for example.
For example, yeah, communist fronts, Marxist fronts, subversive organizations pretending to be churches. We always have those. And just a couple of weeks ago, I saw a group of pastors, these women reverend who said that God is totally fine with killing babies. I wonder what Bible they're reading from. I don't know. But so we'll always have these people. I think the Bible calls them wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending to speak for the church. But all genuine religious organizations, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter, recognize that this is an incredible threat to their freedom, to the freedom of their members, their adherents, and even secular Americans, even homosexual Americans, should be very, very concerned about the implications of this legislation.
Well, again, for our audience, the bill is the Equality Act, also known as H.R. 5 or S788 in the Senate. Well, thank you, Alex, for joining us today on the program, and we wish you the best, and we hope to continue covering this story. And for those of you out there, we would ask that you read Alex's article on thenewamerican.com. Again, Equality Act seeks federal persecution of Christians. Read his article, like it, and share it. Also, be sure to subscribe to the New Americans YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you, and God bless.